Hello, this is Matthew Robert Payne. Don't mind me scratching my nose during this message. The one thing the enemy seems to do is give me a really itchy nose and itches all over the place when I'm doing a video. I don't itch my nose as often in real life. It just seems to happen when I turn on a video. So this is the second conversation I'm going to have with Enoch. Enoch was the seventh from Adam, and he walked so blamelessly with the Lord that the Lord took him home without physical death. And I've been encouraged by the Holy Spirit to develop a friendship with Enoch, and so the Lord has called me to do conversations with Enoch. I don't prepare questions for this, and I just have a free-flowing conversation, and I hope that you're entertained. Enoch is sitting here in the couches in this picture of my parents' house in heaven. And he's sitting there, and so we're having a face-to-face conversation. So when I'm speaking, I'll say Matthew's speaking, and when Enoch's speaking, I'll say Enoch speaks. I can notice who's speaking by the tone in my voice, but you might not notice it. So I'll say Matthew speaking, Enoch speaking. So welcome, Enoch. How are you today? It's Enoch speaking. I spent some time with you today. I told you that the glory would manifest on your life today as I walked with you. And you got on a bus and didn't notice people looking at you, and you wondered whether the glory was on you or whether you'd heard me right. And you got to a train station and walked up to the platform, and a girl got up from a seat and she said, "Take a seat." And then you thought, well, that's the glory. And so you sat down and you got in a discussion with us saying that you got a sore back from exercise, and she knows what it's like to get a sore back, and so you can take my seat. And had a good conversation about her tattoos and her spiritual heritage and her artwork and her being an artist. And it was a really comfortable conversation. It was a real good interaction with a strange girl, a young girl, and it was really good. And you understood that was the glory, and had a couple of interactions in the city, and then you came home and had a good interaction with a woman on a train on the way home. So the glory was with you, and as I go walking with you, you can expect the glory to go with you. There's certain signs of the glory manifesting in a person's life. Some of the signs Matthew has recognized is people look at you, people ask you for money, people ask you for directions, people are more welcoming and open to you. They don't shut you down when you talk to them. People open up and tell you their whole life story when you've got glory on you. Young children stare at you. That's normally the first sign Matthew notices as he passes young children and they stare at him. That's normally a sign when Matthew knows that the glory is manifesting on his life. So the glory is a deeper level of the presence of God. It's presence of God has got levels, and then it goes into the glory realms, and there's realms of glory too. and glory can get stronger and stronger, but the glory realm is always stronger than the presence. And so when the glory comes on a person, they feel the peace and joy of the Lord really strongly, and that's what Matthew's been feeling, and that's an amazing feeling. So you had a good time going out. You needed to be at the train station on the way in to meet the girl that you had the interaction with, and you needed to be on the train on the way back to have the interaction with the other girl. Matthew's got a shirt on saying everything God does is perfect. Matthew's got 80 T-shirts. He's got 200 T-shirts, but he's got 80 of his own T-shirts, and every day he goes out, he witnesses with a T-shirt, and it just puts him in his uniform to tell people that this is a child of God. So this was an especially good T-shirt to have on while you're talking to a person and interacting with them, because they'll read your T-shirt and know that you're coming from a place of God. And there's links to the T-shirts underneath all of his videos. I'd encourage you to buy some and wear them out, witnessing to people. So we had a good time together. You stayed up last night and you've been up all day today. And so you're walking in the manifest presence of God, and the glory is manifesting in your life, and you're really anointed. And that's a good thing. It's a good feeling, and it's a good feeling to walk in the presence of God. And I'm glad you're feeling it. It's Matthew speaking. So I got a sense today, as I was out, I was asking you whether we had to talk about the book of Enoch, and you said to me, Matthew, you've got 70 books. We can talk about them, and we can fill up many videos just talking about each of your books. And you teach on the fundamentals of the kingdom, and so there's no need to talk about the book of Enoch. We've got plenty of books and plenty of material to speak on. And so I heard you say that, and I was very happy, because speaking about the content of my books makes me very comfortable. And it's people who listen to the videos don't have to buy the books if we're talking about the books. So there's the nose rub. You've probably noticed me do it a couple of times before then that I didn't recognize me doing, but that just makes me human, and the human nose rubber, and itch and head scratcher. So we were talking on the way to the station, and you shared that in our next conversation we can talk about a couple of the parables of Jesus and discuss them a little bit. So I want to start with the parable of the Good Samaritan. So can you give us some information about the parable of the Good Samaritan? Can you speak to that parable, Enoch? And can you share some deeper understandings of that with me? and the people listening. So this is Enoch speaking. Jesus lived in a day where many of the routes from town to town had people who used to hide and come out and rob people and beat them up and take their money. And this was spoken about a certain road, and when it was said that the priest and the Levite crossed to the other side and didn't look at the person beaten up by the side of the road. It was a really narrow road, you've heard taught before, and you really had to physically go to the other side of the laneway to avoid the person. It wasn't just a wide opening, it was a small road, and you really had to make a conscious effort to avoid the person. And that's so true about what people do today. They walk past the homeless and they pretend that they're not there. They don't even look at the homeless. They don't engage them with their eyes because they don't want the homeless person to ask them for money. So they walk past as though they're not there. And you heard it taught by a woman in an article saying that one of the cruelest things that happens to the homeless is they start to believe that they're invisible. And the lady that wrote the article said, can you imagine if you walk down the street and everyone didn't look at you, everyone was looking past you and looking around you, but wasn't looking at you, you'd start to feel invisible. And the homeless start to feel invisible. They start to feel that they'll never be part of society, that they're not part of society anymore, and they start to feel invisible. And that comes from people ignoring them and walking around them and disregarding them and pretending they can't see them. And the modern person beaten up on the side of the road is the homeless, or the traditional Aboriginal person in the country sitting in a town square drinking alcohol. It's really sad that people look away and pretend they're not there. What's sadder still is that everyone thinks that they're a good Samaritan. They think that becoming a Christian makes them automatically a good Samaritan, but a good Samaritan would build a relationship with a homeless person and help them get off the streets. And that's what a good Samaritan would do. And there's very few Christians that actually do that. And people think homeless people have a disease that they can catch, that people are afraid of homeless people. And they're just people who are mentally ill and have got illnesses or addictions, and they're hurting people. A homeless person likes a cold Coca-Cola more than you do. A homeless person likes a hot brewed coffee more than you do. A homeless person often hasn't got money to buy a cold 600 ml Coca-Cola. Homeless person hasn't often got money to buy a freshly brewed coffee. Homeless people generally don't have much money, and that's why they sit there begging for help. And what's so sad is that the modern Christian ignores them and crosses to the other side of the road, and they pretend that they don't see them. And when the homeless person asks them, have they got any spare change, they nod their head and they say they haven't. And I can understand that. Years ago, I used to have change in my wallet. I don't carry notes or coins in my wallet anymore. I only carry cards, and I do all my transactions via card machines. So I haven't got money for the homeless now, but from time to time when I have cash, I give them $10, or I give them money. That's obviously Matthew speaking. So it's Enoch speaking again. So the homeless are real people, and they would be happy if you just simply acknowledge them. If you asked them whether you could buy them a Coke or a coffee, many of them would be happy. Many of them would say, no, you don't need to bother. Thank you for asking. Many of them are really humble. And I appear to homeless people, and I buy them Cokes and coffee, and I come down to earth in a real body. And I've spent a lot of time with homeless people, interacting with them. And I remember Elijah came down to you as a homeless person in a body, Matthew, and you had an interaction with Elijah, and I do it the same way. And you didn't refuse him the time that he asked for money, and that was a real homeless person that asked for money, but it was Elijah in his spirit, and Elijah was directing him, and you passed the test that day, and gave him your phone number, and he rang up and said something rude to you next time he rang, and you found out it wasn't Elijah the second time. But Jesus told these parables for a reason. He said that the Samaritan, which were hated by the Jews, was the one who showed mercy on the Jewish guy that had been beaten up. And you know the story. He took him to a hotel and paid for a couple of days at the hotel, and went on a journey, and bathed his sores and stuff, bathed his wounds, and paid the hotel owner for the 2 days that he was away, and he restored the person. The Christian is in this world to restore people. That's their job, to restore people. And you can only be a good Samaritan when you're doing it. And buying a homeless person like a Coca-Cola or a coffee or a chocolate is one way of restoring hope in the homeless person. And you can go and ask a homeless person, can you buy them a coffee, a Coke, or a chocolate? And give them that choice, and go off and buy the coffee or the Coke or the chocolate, and come back and have a 20-minute conversation with the homeless person. Ask them why they're on the streets and what are the barriers stopping them from getting off the streets, and have they got an addiction, and what's their addiction, and take mercy on the person and treat them like a real human, and have them as a guest in your house. Treat them like you'd treat a guest in your own house. Jesus says, these people can't repay you, but the Heavenly Father will repay you. And what's done in secret will be done in the open, and God will pour into your bosom much more. Give, and it'll be given back to you, flowing over and bubbling over. And if the homeless person is on the same corner, you can often buy them a Coke or a chocolate or a coffee, or just give them $10. You can often give them money or minister to them, and over time you can build a relationship with them. And that's when they'll get the confidence to come off the street. But why am I saying this? Why am I saying this? Because many people sit in churches and they spend time in churches, and they never understand that parable of the Good Samaritan. They don't understand that they're woefully missing the mark. They don't see any person beaten up by the side of the road. They've never seen someone beaten up on the side of the road. And so they just assume that the Good Samaritan doesn't refer to them. And most Christians think that they're the hero in the story, so the Good Samaritan, and they don't believe that they'd cross to the other side of the road and ignore a beaten up, broken person, but they walk past homeless people every day and ignore them. And it's important that people realize their own hypocrisy. It's important for me to share this message with people so that they come to understand that they can step it up a notch and they can stop for the one in front of them. Heidi Baker has got a popular message, Stop for the One. And she says, if you want to be used for great works of God, just stop for the one person that God puts in front of you. And that means stop. When you're walking past a homeless person, stop and greet the person. Ask them if you can pray for them. Ask them if they want to talk. You don't even have to buy them a coffee or a chocolate or a Coke. Just stop and treat them like a real person. Don't preach to them. Don't say that they've got to become a Christian, or do they know about Jesus? Do they know that they're going to hell if they don't give their life to Jesus? Stop with the religion and just start with the love. So it's Matthew speaking. I've heard a lot of that before, Enoch, but I'm so pleased to hear what I've said before, because I know that it's really coming from you. And I just feel your love for the homeless. I see you walking among the homeless people, and in the Matthew Talbot Hostel in Sydney, I can see you interacting with people. I can see you coming down in bodies from heaven and interacting with the homeless. I see you have a real love for them, and that you're becoming as an angel unawares to these people. You seem to really understand them, and although I've said similar things in the past in my books, I sense you really understand the heart of the homeless. I sense that you've lived on the streets and lived the life of a homeless person to understand that. And I sense you saying yes to that. Yes, you have lived the life of a homeless person on earth, and you really, truly relate to their life, and a life of living rough and sleeping rough and not having shelter, and really understand their plight. And that was a great thing to do, to come and live homeless on the streets of Sydney, in order to understand the life of the homeless. And you're just showing me that a person that I interacted with that was homeless on the streets, that gave me $50 one time, that was you. And so I've met you in the flesh, and that always impacted me, that he gave me $50 that time. And I saw you sleeping outside a homeless hostel in the wet, and you always had a Bible, and you always had a Christian message, and I couldn't understand the English too well. I had a sense, as you're saying, that you've lived the life of a homeless person in Sydney. And then I was given that image of the time we broke communion, and you gave me $50. And so this is really supernatural. You really interacted with my life as that guy, and you lived the life of the homeless. I remember God showed me the homeless, and then made my position become homeless at one stage. And I asked, after 2 weeks in the homeless hostel, can I move out? Jesus said, no, stay. And 2 weeks later, I asked again, and Jesus said, stay. Asked 2 weeks later, and Jesus got angry with me and said, how are you ever going to understand the homeless unless you live with them? And I lived there for 3 months. And it wasn't until I became homeless and lived as a homeless that I understood their plight. So I understand, if you're listening to this, I understand if you think I'm being tough on you, as Enoch describes the parable of the Good Samaritan. I understand that you may look at this teaching and think that it's tough, but both me and Enoch have been homeless, and we've watched the people say no. I've watched people for years saying no to the homeless, and disregarding them and disrespecting them. And it's a sad plight, and it's sad that the average Christian thinks that they're the Good Samaritans when they're clearly not, and they clearly don't understand the parable like Enoch described. So have you got any more words to say about this, Enoch? Well, as you know, that rather large guy that seemed like a Jewish guy to you, that always had his Bible open, was me, and you understand it was me now. He was a real witness. You weren't the only one that I witnessed to, and he was a real witness to the people in the Matthew Talbot hostel. And people just don't understand that parable unless they're told that the beggar beaten up by the side of the road is a homeless person in modern society, and they just don't understand. And when they don't understand, when they're oblivious, when they don't understand the parable, they're not accountable. But everyone who's listened to this video, everyone who's read this chapter in the book, is accountable now. Every homeless person they pass now, they'll be judged for. Every person that they don't stop and minister to, they'll be judged for. And I'm not saying that you've got to stop for every homeless person and interact with everyone, but you got to start stopping. You got to start being the light. And we're going to discuss quite a number of the parables of Jesus because they're the essence of what Jesus taught. But you've got to feel the conviction of this message. You've got to feel deep in your heart the conviction. And you can't write it off anymore. You've heard a person from heaven. You've heard a testimony that he lived on the streets of Sydney and Matthew met him and interacted with him and had an encounter with him where he gave Matthew $50 and blessed him. You've heard this message from a person in heaven interacting with people on earth. And I've lived as a homeless, and I know how many people don't look at you. I know how many people don't respect you. I know how society shuns you when you dress as a homeless. And I can testify to Matthew's compassion and understanding of me and his love for me. And I can testify that he was a bright, shining light in his homeless hostel. He had many friends and many people loved him. He was always giving his money away. And I want people to understand that time is short. What you do on this earth, you're going to be judged for. And at the Bema seat of judgment, people are going to be judged for the good and the bad that they did. The Bema seat of judgment is where the Christians go to be judged. And so they're already in heaven, but the Bema seat judges the good and the bad that they did. And you're going to be judged for denying the homeless. You're going to be shown how many times you denied them. You're going to be shown how you heard this message and you ignored it. You're going to be shown your attitude and the bad things you did. To know to do good and not to do it is a sin. And so now, with this message, you actually know, and this message that you actually, if you're convicted, you need to change your ways. You need to not so much repent, although you can repent for the Lord and pray for forgiveness for the times that you've ignored the homeless. But you need to make a change in your life and change the way you treat the homeless from now on. And if you live in a country town, if you live in a town where there are no homeless and you don't live in a city, you understand the message. The people that are poor, the housewife that comes to your church whose husband is a gambling drunk, giving her money and supplying her money for her children to eat is another person that you're being the Good Samaritan for. And people just don't want to hear needs in your society. They just ignore the cries of the needy. They just ignore the plight of the brokenhearted. They just ignore it. They turn a deaf ear to it. And if you're hearing this message, you can't turn your ears, you can't turn off your ears to the plight of the brokenhearted anymore. It's time to step up and it's time to love. Everyone in this world loves to make a difference, loves to wants to be used by God to do powerful things. Well, you can be a powerful person and change one person's life. Matthew was in Sydney for about 18 months, seeing that homeless person. While Matthew was on the streets of Sydney, hanging around the streets of Sydney, he was homeless for 3 to 6 months, and then he moved into accommodation but kept on going back to the homeless places to eat. When he spent his time with the homeless, I was homeless, and he used to see me around, and we both spent our time on the streets of Sydney. And because we both invested our time there, we've got the right to speak on this subject. And it's a sad subject. It's a sad thing that one of the Messiah's teachings, one of the greatest teachers in the world, teaching has been so neglected by Christians and misunderstood by Christians, and then because it's misunderstood and neglected, and it's time for that to stop. It's time for that to be remedied. It's time that the Christian church rise up. It's time for people to stop for the one. So you can have some homework. You can do a search on YouTube called Stop for the One by Heidi Baker, and you can listen to her message, and her message will underscore and complement this message really well, because her message is stopping for the one, stopping for the person in front of you. And everyone wants to be a world beater and wants to make world change, but they don't want to stop for the one. They don't want to stop for the one person that needs prayer or needs finances or needs help with the rent. They don't want to stop for the individual. They want to be a big world changer. And Heidi Baker is a big world changer, but she also stops for every single person in front of her. And she has thousands of starving orphans that she takes off the streets. And she's rescued girls that are living in rubbish tips and being used as prostitutes as young teenage girls just to eat. And she takes them off the streets. And I was at a conference that Heidi Baker went to. I was at that conference that Matthew went to, and I was there too, listening to Heidi Baker. And she's a real hero in the world, but her message, Stop for the One, is the message that you want to look up and watch, because it'll impact you and it'll perfectly complement this message. I hope you were encouraged by this conversation I had with Matthew. I hope that you were convicted and truly cut to the heart, because this message is meant to cut to the heart. And the spirit of the fear of the Lord manifested in this message. And it's a proper fear of the Lord. There should be fear. As many of you aren't going to have a good time at the beam of judgment. And many of you are going to be judged for the good and bad that you did. And neglect is bad. Not doing something that is good is bad. And many of you have got no conscience, and your conscience needs to be pricked. And I hope that this message has brought conviction for you, and that you can change your ways and repent before the Lord, and take the matter into the Lord's hands and change your ways and change what you're doing and become someone who makes the Lord proud. So we're going to continue on some of the parables, and we're going to continue speaking about things that Matthew understands. But it's a real honor to speak to you again, Matthew, and the 40 minutes is up. And I pray that people are blessed by this video, and pray that they're eventually blessed by the book that it'll become. God bless.